Hello, and welcome to Using Visual Studio to Debug Programs. In this video, we will look at how to use the Visual Studio Debugger to find and fix problems in our C++ programs. The problem we're going to work with is a computer program where we enter the sales totals for 12 months, January through December. The program needs to figure out which month has the highest sales, which month has the lowest sales. We need to calculate what are the average sales, and then display those. The month with the highest sales, the month with the lowest sales, and the average monthly sales for the year. So we're going to do this. We're going to fix the problems in this program using Visual Studio, and the tools we're going to use involve breakpoints, which tells the program where to stop, tells the debugger to stop the program at certain points. We're going to examine variables, and we're going to single step through the program in order to see what's going on. At this point, I'm going to switch to Visual Studio and the program we're going to debug. This program is the monthly sales analysis program, and you can see that it has an array of the month names so that we can display those. It has a main program where we first call a function to input the data. Then we call a function to figure out which is the high month. We call another function to figure out which is the low month. We calculate the average sales, and then we display the results. Looks pretty good. Down below you see the different functions that do all of those tasks for us. In particular, you see a function called high month and low month. These are very similar to examples in the book that show you how to figure out the highest or lowest value in an array. Okay, so this program looks good except that it doesn't work, and we need to figure out what's wrong and how to fix it. So to do that, we're going to run the program in debug mode. If you go up to debug and click on Start Debugging, it will enter debug mode. If you're not interested in debugging, you can just go to Start Without Debugging. Also, you can just click on this green arrow here. That runs the program in debug mode. So I'm just going to do that. And the program asks me to enter the sales in dollars for January. Because we're going to have to run this program several times to fix it, I'm going to enter very easy to remember data. So I'm going to enter $1 for January, 2 for February, 3 for March, and so on. And something went wrong. Look, it started to print out the highest sales we're in and then stopped. The error we can see here says that there was an access violation. That means that the computer tried to access a part of memory it wasn't supposed to. The computer program tried to access a part of memory it wasn't supposed to, and so the program stopped. When you get this kind of exception and you're trying to debug the program, you click on the break button, tell the program to break. And here, the yellow arrow shows us where the program stopped. Well, that doesn't look very familiar, and it's not very helpful to us. It turns out that this is inside a C library routine that the C++ compiler called to do some work, and that doesn't help us much figure out what's going on. But if you look down here in this corner, we see the call stack, and it shows us this is the routine, the one called care traits. Care traits length, where the program stopped. It was called by another routine in the library, but that was called by a program called main. That's our program. If we just come down the call stack to a program name that we recognize and double-click there, that takes us here. And now the arrow here shows us which line the error happened in. So now we need to take a look to see what's happening. Down here in this window, we see the locals, and it shows us the value of the different variables. You see that we have a low value, and it says it's 0. We can look at the value here, or we can hover over them like this and show that that low is 0. We can also see that average, that doesn't look very good. And we can see that high is a -1. That seems like a problem too. In fact, the problem stopped right about here. It printed out the highest sales were in, and then it got an error. And that's because at this point, high has the value of -1. And we're trying to index into month array with a -1. That you can't do that. Arrays in C++ start at 0. So that's our problem. So let's figure out. We set high up here, and that was from calling the high month function. And we passed to the high month function the sales array. Remember, we entered in the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. But when I look at the sales array function right here, I see that the first value is -9 times 10 to the 61st power. That's a really negative number, very negative, very big negative number. And so are all these other values. In fact, this is a number that data that hasn't been used gets initialized to. And so that's telling us that somehow this sales array didn't properly get initialized with the data we wanted to. And that should have happened in this input data function up here. So let's take a look to see what's going on in input data. That function is down here. To examine what's going wrong, I'm going to set a breakpoint as we start the for loop. And to do that, I just go off to the left of the line I want to set the breakpoint on in this gray stripe, and I just click. And it puts a red dot there. That's supposed to be like a stop sign. And that means when we run the program next, it'll stop there. We can take a look to see what's happening at that point. So now I'm going to go to debug. I'm going to tell the debugger to stop, and I'm going to start all over again. Start debugging again, and I have to, you see that the console window came up, but it doesn't say anything. Well, that's because we told it to stop before it says to enter the sales for $. So we're going to look here, and we can see that the value of I is 0. And that sounds good. We set I equal to 0, right? And we want to enter the sales in dollars for month array, right? Looks like that's okay. That's going to be January. Let's step over this line to the next one. And the debugger has special buttons for that. We have a step into, a step over, and a step out of button. Step into means if we're going to call a function in this line, it will go into that function. The debugger will go in and stop inside that. If we want to step over a function and just go to the next line in this function, we can use this one. That's what I'm going to use here. I'm going to say step over, and you see the arrow went to the next line. Right? And now we're about to enter we've got a CN into the sales array. Let's do one more step and see what happens. And so it now says, please enter the sales for January. I'm going to put a 1 and hit enter. So now we have moved down to here. Let's see what happened to that 1 that I just entered. We can see the sales array down here, and what it's showing me is that the first value in the sales array is still this uninitialized thing. Why didn't it assign a 1 there? You've probably already figured it out. It's because I told it to put it in sales sub num months, and num months is 12. I really meant to set it into sales sub 0, and then the next one into sales sub 1. That's I. Right? So there's the first problem, that we used the value to show how many elements there were in the array instead of telling it which specific element to store it into. That's why none of the values 0 through 11 were set. Okay, so we'll fix that problem. We don't need this breakpoint anymore, so I'll delete it. And we'll go back up, we'll stop debugging, and then we'll start debugging again. And I'll start entering data this time. 1, 2, and this time we've got another breakpoint, and it's another access violation. So let's stop there. Down below, you'll see that it tells us that the problem is on line 38 in main, in the call stack. Well, that's an improvement because our last problem was on line 37. I'm going to double-click there, and you see that we got past our highest sales. And if I show you what the console shows, see, it shows us that our highest sales were in December, but now it's stopped in the middle of telling us what the lowest sales were. So let's see what's going on there. When we look at the value of low, it says low is -1. That doesn't sound good. Same kind of problem we had before. All right? So, but high was computed right. We got the value of 11 for high. So the high month methods, the high month function seemed to work. The low month function doesn't seem to work. So let's go down to the low month function, and we will set a breakpoint right here in front of this if statement, inside the loop, to see what happens. Now we have to stop debugging and run again. And here we are at this breakpoint. You see the yellow arrow inside the red circle tells us that we have stopped here. We see the value of I is 0. That's good. Notice that low index started at -1. That sounds all right. And the lowest value we set to -1. So now we're going to do this if statement. And we're going to check to see if sales sub I, and we can look here, it's showing us, by hovering over it, that sales sub I is 0, sales sub 0 is 1, and we're going to check to see if that is less than lowest. Is 1 less than negative 1? It's not. But are the sales ever going to be less than negative 1? No, they're not. So setting the low index, setting the lowest value, I should say, setting lowest to negative 1 isn't working, because this if statement here is never going to be true, so we're never going to change the value of lowest or low index, which means we're going to return a negative 1, which is going to cause our access violation. We look at our high month function and we set highest to negative 1 and high index to negative 1. Seems like that should work for lowest, but it doesn't, because in highest we check to see if the sales are greater than negative 1, and some of the sales are going to be greater than negative 1, so we make this change. Here for low index, for low month, we're checking to see which ones are lowest, are lower than our current lowest value. None of them are going to be lower than negative 1, so we're never going to change it. What we really wanted to do for lowest was set it to some high number that at least one of our months we're going to have sales lower than that. Let's set it to 9,999,999. I suspect at least some month we're not going to sell more than $10 million worth of goods, whatever it is that we're selling. Let's see if that fixes this problem. I'm going to delete this breakpoint. Really all I have to do is click on it, stop debugging, and run again. And we made some progress, right? This tells us that the highest sales were in December with 12. That looks right. The lowest sales were in January with 1. That looks right. It's telling us that our average monthly sales were $6. That doesn't seem right. In fact, if we add up all these and divide by 12, we should get $6.50. So something went wrong in our average monthly sales. Let's figure out what happened there. To do that, we need to go down to our average sales, and we'll set a breakpoint here, and then we'll stop debugging again and restart. Okay, so we've stopped right here. We can see that sum is set to 0. That sounds good. Let's just step through. Using the step over button, we're going to see that I is now 1. And the first value we're going to add to sum, if we step by, we see that we added 2 to sum. Wait a minute. The first sales are 1. Sales sub 0 are 1. There's the problem that we see. We see that we didn't start the array, we didn't start our loop at 0 like we should have. We started it at 1. So we didn't add up all of the values for this. So here we'll change that to 0, and we'll clear our breakpoint, stop debugging, and we'll run it one more time. And something still didn't work out correctly here because our average monthly sales are showing $6. Let's see if we can figure out what's wrong. We will have to set another breakpoint. So we will stop debugging. We will set a breakpoint back in the program. I'm going to set it at the very end when we return. Set the breakpoint. We're going to start debugging, and we're going to enter the same numbers. And we get down here, we see that sum is 78, num months it should show me what num months is. We know that that is 12, right? So we're going to do 78 divided by 12. What is that? Well, 6 times 12 is 72, so there's 6 left over, so that means that sum divided by 78 divided by 12 is 6.5. So how come we're only getting 6? The answer is sum is an integer value, and num months is an integer value, 12. So it's doing integer arithmetic and throwing out the decimal part. That is easily solved by changing sum to be a double and initializing it to 0.0. Now when we do this division, it will divide a double by an integer, and it will give us our decimal part. We'll clear this breakpoint, we'll stop debugging, and we'll run it one more time. There we go. Highest sales in December with 12, lowest sales in January with 1, average monthly sales were 6.5. That's the right answer. So now you've seen that we've used breakpoints to stop and examine variables, the value of variables in our program. We've used stepping to watch the flow of the program. Using these tools, you can debug the programs that you write in the future. Thank you for watching the video.